Welcome to the presentation on contract management fundamentals. My name is Ben Edwards, as part of the Relevate community. So the reason behind my diving into contract management fundamentals was that I've worked with them for 20 years in different industries. And what I see in a lot of industries is they sell their services under contracts and they're good at the services they deliver, but they fail to understand that there's a method in that contract management in itself, and it's a separate skill set. So basically, the context I'd like to present for Relevate is that, a lot of people here have growing businesses and you know what you do well. It's not about your services you sell, whether it be IT or operations and maintenance or your services as a business. It's delivering them in a B2B context. And those contracts start to come into place. Or you may soon start to see contracts as an opportunity. And therefore, you need to start thinking about contract management as a potential issue for your business. And any one of these contracts, at that point in time could be losing money. They might take an excessive time and effort. It's the old 80-20 rule, for the return you're getting on that contract. Or be with a client you don't want, like, or need. They may not be a client for you. And for those reasons, you need to understand how to manage the contract as opposed to just the services. So contract manager is generally linear. It just starts through, a left-to-right thing there with a proposal from the business through to implement and perform. It's fairly easy, but what it's not project management. Now, that's the Prince 2 model there, but they're very different than project management, not necessarily a Gantt chart style, things like that, or assignment of resources. It's more of a linear process. And obviously the perform there is where the majority of the effort is. That's not to scale. Obviously the perform is the longest term item and the highest value, but it's just a linear process in itself. So what is contract management in itself? Now, one of the definitions is a good contract management is the process that ensures both parties meet their obligations of the contract to deliver some objectives. So the client has obligations as well as the contractor to achieve objectives for the client and for the contractor, and both of them should benefit from the contract. So financially for the contractor usually, or more efficient systems or cost savings or other benefits for the client. So generally we come down to those three things. Every contract manager or your lead on the contract and a contract management plan should clarify those three things: obligations, objectives, and benefits. If you focus on those three things, then you're a long way in front. But having said that, that's for both parties. The client's obligations are different than the contractor, as well as the objectives and benefits. Now, it's to the benefit of the contracting company and the contract lead or the business lead to understand all six. So the client might not understand their objectives and benefits, but it's better for the contractor to understand that so they know how to maintain the client relationship, which we'll come into in a minute. But it's key for you as a contract delivery entity or person to understand those six obligations, objectives, and benefits. Now, some people think this applies to contract law. It doesn't necessarily do so. That's separate. So contract law, I did a course, it cost about $3,500 to do contract law for non-lawyers. And we turned up, there was about 20 of us instructed by some contract lawyers, business lawyers. And we asked a lot of questions about contract law outside of the basic construct of a contract. And their answer was pretty much the cruel C: get yourself a lawyer, son, you're going to need a real good one. So you need a lawyer to support you in contract law. That's the terms and conditions. However, outside of the terms and conditions, don't put too much emphasis on it. For companies, big global conglomerates, like you get a contract with Siemens. Let's say Amanda gets a contract with Siemens to do some HR duties, things like that. They're just going to hand her the terms and say, there you go. There is no discussion about terms with Siemens. So don't weigh too heavily on the T's and C's, but you do need to understand your risks and obligations and so forth within those terms and conditions. And so, there's governance required around the document, a review of the document, understand the legal risks and consequences, but they can be managed out with a commercial and operational risk management processes so that those legal issues don't come to fruition. But ultimately, the contracts, usually, in my experience of over 20 years, the document itself, once signed and executed, and there's a celebratory party, and everybody has a champagne, then it goes in the drawer, and you get down to the delivery of the contract. That turns over to an operational context, and it goes down to the delivery of it. And when you have the contract comes back out of the drawer, it's probably already too late. But so you want to, and so contracts usually only go legal when the relationship fails. And that's usually from a misunderstanding or non-compliance with the obligations or objectives from one or both parties or either party. And so bringing it back to the relationship is key before it goes back to the document. Helps protect the contract and ergo the business. So client relationship management in a contract context isn't necessarily just a sales process. It is a primary requirement and skill in contract management, but it's not the only skill. So once you convert a client and get a contract, there's 3 stages to it. There's acquire, enhance, and retain. And each of these have sub-processes. The enhance and retain each have their own very detailed methodology to follow through the client relationship management after you've made the initial client acquisition and got a contract. Many B2B service contractors stop at the acquisition of the client. They think we've got a contract, okay, next sale or next contract, and so on. In history, in many contracts, the easiest growth opportunity for the business is organic growth within that contract. It's additional services, scope creep, value-added services, things like that. For a government contractor, we were maintaining significant assets in Brisbane, and we ended up becoming their procurement company and project management company. And we grew the revenue 20% year on year based on just the enhance stage of the CRM. So then you look at the retain phase. So when you come to rebid, and this is again, could be a long discussion in itself, the retain part is, do you choose to stay with that client or are there better clients out there? Or, and so do we rebid the follow-on contract and stay multi-contracts with them? Or do we give it up? Some government entities don't like to have back-to-back contracts. There can be a devil of incumbency. They don't like to give it to the same contractor twice. They want to see money flow to different businesses, things like that. Some of these rebid costs can be high. Some, large government contracts can be $1 million, $2 million, $5 million as a rebid cost. And if you apply that to your previous contract that you had, that can impact your overall revenue of that contract period. So the retain is in itself another process. Do we really want to keep this client? Are we going to get the follow-on contract? What are the costs of rebid and what are the risks? And are they really going to retain us? And I've seen that happen. I've known where we're not going to win a contract. The company still wanted to bid, spent $2 million on it, and we were never going to win the contract. So it's a business decision. So with the CRM, we come down to contract manager skills. So what is it that the contract manager does to look after the legal, the relationship, and the operations KPIs and so forth? Well, that's ultimately a lot of hats within a contract manager skill set. However, it can be drilled down to 3 things. You need expert knowledge. I can't sell an IT contract. I can't manage an IT contract, even though I've been utilized as an IT contract project manager, because I've had the management skills and the soft skills and to pull on the technical knowledge from the people within the business. So the management skills are obviously your financial and all those types of things, making decisions, coordination, prioritization, recovery work around any fail points, and your soft skills, your relationship, your attentive listening, your ability to communicate, give clarity to the client, and things like that. So I'd say you would need at least two of these three, preferably all three, to be a high dollar value multinational company contract manager position. And while I'm on this point, people don't advertise for contract managers. That's usually operations directors, project directors, or project managers or delivery manager, things like that. It's never really advertised as a contract manager from a delivery perspective. So you have to be able to read through these positions and see what are they really looking for here. So as part of that skill set, there are a lot of others. And here's a table that I'll send this presentation out, but there are a lot of skill sets such in there, and skills in coordination and communication, persuasion and negotiation. Negotiation is key because sometimes you'll have a fixed fee and a variable fee commercial construct in the same contract. And the client doesn't want to add it to the variable fee, which is a value add. They would like to force it under the fixed fee so they don't have any increase in the cost of that contract. Things like that. So you need strong negotiation skills, strong commercial skills as the lead. Too many times I've seen companies win a contract and they'll put someone with only technical knowledge and none of these competence areas from a contract management perspective. Not really, capable of managing a business relationship and not really understanding the administration and management, like KPIs, monthly reporting, escalation processes. So there's a whole depth of skill sets. And there's another 6 I had to list, and I thought I won't go too deep, around this. You need invoicing, reporting, governance. Governance is a major issue around particularly the higher dollar contracts. So that's when you're looking for someone to manage the contracts within your business, you probably want to look at these skill sets as well, not just the technical competency. And I guess that's part of the summary. What I say is that having experienced too many businesses give away or have contracts where they don't assign the right people, they fail to understand the objectives, obligations, and benefits of both parties, and they get caught out, or being able to inform the client of what their obligations are to make sure that the client meets their obligations, because they always do. They seem to forget it. The client goes, okay, we've given you a contract, off you go. Then you need to go, hang on a minute, you have to do this for us. And so that's a key skill set. And technical competency, as mentioned, may not mean you're a good contract manager. It's like a plumber may not be a good plumbing business manager. A lot of them just revert back to just being a plumber because they realize that managing a business is a whole different skill set or time allocation. And contract management is a skill set in itself, but it can be paired with technical competency and manage the client life cycle in addition to the contract life cycle, because those life cycles are different. You might have a 5-year contract. You might have a client for 20 years. You might have multiple contracts with the same client in different areas or different regions. And you need to manage each of those contracts in isolation, but under the same client. So you need to look at those separately as the client life cycle versus the contract life cycle. And as well as if a contract is at risk and you think it might be heading to a termination, either for convenience or other reason for cause, termination for cause, then they can be recovered. Generally, clients don't like to go back out to market because of those expenses that I talked about before. That takes them time and cost, and then re-engagement of a new contractor. So they would probably prefer to have a recovery of the incumbent contract than go to market again, unless that's the end of a permitted tenure. That's usually when they usually only like to go to market. And if you do deliver B2B contracts, get training for your contract leads, particularly if they only have technical competency. It's better to give them training in the management and the soft skills required of a contract manager, because that I can't stress that enough. Actually, while we're on that point, We even had to train a former CEO in an Australian-based company working for Origin Energy as a contractor to Origin Energy. And the CEO didn't understand that we were actually a contracting company. We provided service contracts. And so myself and the BD director, I was EGM in there and he was the BD director. He was an ex-lawyer. And we did a presentation at the company conference about contract management. And the CEO was basically, okay, virtually tuning out at the start of it. By the end of it, contract management was her new key management speak. She realized that the risk to the company in not being able to manage contracts well. And so then it became an impetus to ensure that we had the right people in the right roles, leading contracts with the right training to protect the business in the contracts we delivered. Apologies for that. Just going backwards there. So finally, you can contact me if you need more information, via the Relevate community. And, I'm happy to partake with that. That discussed with Sam last week, some of these items, he'll recognize a little bit of it. So there are recovery methods. In each of these slides and each of the sub points, there are tactics and tools you can use to assist with your delivery of B2B contracts. So over to you guys if you have any questions.
That's excellent. I did put one in the chat before, and it was around how do you know which ones won't allow rebid? So you mentioned before with the government contracts that we're not going to come back online. How do you know?
I think you can tell by the relationship that, I could feel it in the relationship that they usually have to invite three tenderers and they usually have to invite the incumbent. So to be polite, if they don't invite you, then you don't have any costs. But if they invite you and two others, you should be able to get a bit of a feeling. And, a lot of these big contracting companies, like in the old days at Transfield, at Tees and Tenix, you'd all sort of in to talk. We'd all know each other. And you'd say, are they talking to you? No, they're not talking to me. Yeah, they're talking to us 3 times a week. And you'd get an idea that, okay, the client's engaging a lot with them and not much with us. Or, that we've had some, that's a government entity, the likelihood of re-awarding is low. And, actually, it's a good point. As a contract manager, you should be able to pull this out. Are you happy with this? What are the chances of getting it again? And you'd go through a risk assessment or a bid likelihood review with your BD director in your business and your CEO, things like that, to say, what's this going to cost us? What's the likelihood of getting awarded? And what harm is it to our reputation if we don't bid? Is it going to annoy the government entity because they need 3 bidders and you withdraw? What's it going to do to them? And are they going to get really annoyed and you're never going to get another contract? So there's a lot of facets to the rebid process. Or you might say, well, rebid, we're just going to put in the same document, put our pricing up 2%, spend about 10 grand on it, and we're done. Things like that. So there's different methods because the impact is cost and time on your resources. And there's other higher priority, higher value contracts to go and put those resources and finances into. So then you'll say, okay, we'll take it out of this one, but we still need to put in a bid of some description. And so the government can use and say, yes, we've got 3 bids, but we're going to discredit that one because they've only just submitted the same and they put it up by 3%. See you later. Things like that. So there's different tactics around that to manage your resources within the business, because obviously you always look at your likelihood of winning a bid and before you put your bid in.
Yeah, I think this one would be useful shared in the defense community space as well, because and Hayden, who runs a fire safety business, he did a bid for a major piece of work with government on defense on base. And it was just doing fire safety stuff. And he's like, oh, I don't qualify. I can't do this, 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 and this. And they're like, no. We want you to apply because we want to support the small business. We want you. We know you can't do it all. You do that bit. We've got objectives to meet. So please do apply. And he was literally the only one that put his hat in the ring. And, you don't shoot for it, you don't get. But at that same token, there's times when everybody goes for it and no one's going to get it.
No, that's right. And yeah, there is. And that's market knowledge as well. Yeah. And a good sales or BD guy should be aware of this and, competitiveness and likelihood. But I've seen Origin Energy out in Surat, just to use that name again. They were good with local businesses. They wanted to use local businesses. So when they had to use local transport companies, they probably weren't compliant to oil and gas standards as far as transport management, and all of their compliance requirements. So they helped build them up to the standards they needed, or gave them an opportunity, said, if we give you this contract, you're going to commit to implement these items after the award. We'll give you a transition period of 3 months to implement all these systems. And so then you don't invest pre-bid, that's post-award investment into advancing your systems. And you can always present that, as in after the award of the contract, we'll do X, Y, Z. And that becomes part of your obligations.
Interesting. I had a conversation with a insurance broker. Sorry to take everyone's airtime on this, but his concept was, you're going for this contract and you don't buy the insurance, and you say in the bid, you say option 1 is with uninsured. Option 2 is as in you insure it. Option 2 is you pay for our insurance, as in you sell them the risk. You say you don't have to wear the risk, but you pay for it.
Hmm.
And it's just interesting, all the little contract levers and things that you do in the negotiation phase. But
Absolutely. And you can price risk in.
yeah,
And
as you
when
should.
it comes to, I've sat on conference calls with the US, and recommended a margin to a CEO and a COO and a VP. And I said, look, competitive is this percent, but I understand our business doesn't go below that percent. But my recommendation is the competitive percent, but that brings risk back on us. Now, I know that we can get efficiency. I'll get back to that target margin after the award of the contract through efficiency over time, but our bid margin has to be lower, and accept the risk at the bid for the first 3 months until I gain those efficiencies.
Mm.
And they agreed with that. So we bid at the lower margin and we got awarded the contract. That was, 5-year, $250 million contract.
Play money.
We did 140 million the following year, so it soon went over 250.
Oh, right. Okay.
And that's that, they'll get then the organic growth in your incumbent contracts is where your value is. So
Yeah.
sometimes, if we got, you call it share of wallet. You get a big company who has a big wallet, and you're only contracted for one service, and they have deficient capabilities in other areas.
Mm.
You can fulfill those services as a value add. And so some companies even go in and underbid the initial entry because they know that they can potentially grow the services within the business of that same contract.
Yeah, land and expand. I've heard it where someone will try to sell them some minuscule thing like a $50 widget or something, but then they've already gone through the vetting and the buyer process.
Exactly.
And then, like, next time the buy team go around, they're like, "Oh, we've dealt with these guys before." Yep.
And one thing I should have put on there, be easier to work with than their own internal departments, because we became the procurement company for a government entity, even though it was not our services, and they came to us because it was easier to buy through us and add a cost plus margin of 9.5% than it was to go through their own government department and not get it in time and probably cost 3 times more.
I've heard of another version of that, and again, I apologize for taking all the airtime here, where I think it was a lawn mowing contractor for council had a cost plus arrangement, and basically, every time he mowed the lawn, broke a blade, need to replace this thing, need to replace that thing, and then of course it cost a hell of a lot because 10% on top of that was pretty good.
Yes. And that's
Like,
it. That's how he pulls money out. But
yeah,
that's where the contract manager and the client
yeah,
was deficient. They start noticing a pattern in behaviors and
mm,
things like that.
yeah. Well, really appreciate that. That's been amazing. We have gone a little bit over time, but I think that was a good, solid, high level, very much worth presentation there.